Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Spiritual Cake Podcast. We talk about anything and everything that has to do with that spiritual side of our existence. You're familiar with the physical and the mental and the emotional, but we have been discussing the spiritual, whatever that is. My name is Clint Houghton. With me is Wendy Dahl. Wendy?
Hi, Clint.
Hello, Wendy. If you're joining us for the first time, you should know that neither Wendy nor I run any kind of a religious organization, nor has our formal education been along those lines. We were both raised relatively conservative Christian. Wendy is Mormon. I was raised Lutheran, but have since explored a lot of different philosophies and theologies. Plus, we were both in the wedding industry with an international clientele, and that has exposed us to a lot of different customs and traditions and rituals. And we bring all of that into this conversation. And that's exactly what it is. It's a conversation. We're not going to try to convince you of anything. We just want you to join in. And if you do want to join in, then at the end of this episode, we will tell you how to do that. Wendy, I've talked many times about how words are just symbols, right? We're just use words as a way to try to communicate either a concept or a thing, just so that we can understand each other on a certain level. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Well, you specialize in South Asian weddings, and there's a whole vocabulary connected with the events that you do. For instance, name one thing that is part of a Hindu wedding.
Most common thing is called a puja,
Okay,
which
there you
is
go.
a word for any kind of like ceremony that happens. But there's like little mini ceremonies. So like you have the wedding ceremony, but it has multiple pujas inside of the ceremony.
Now, the fact that you know that gives you a little bit of power. Like you have
Hmm.
knowledge that's really useful, but it's kind of like inside baseball knowledge, which I think
Hmm.
is really fun. So I grew up in the Lutheran church. There were all kinds of words connected to the house of worship that I haven't heard since. My mom she was secretary to that church, so she knew everything. She knew the name of everything. It was kind of cool when she would say, "Did you go to the," and she would name a place or a part of the church, and I knew exactly what she was talking about. And that was inside information because I knew that all the other people in my life had no idea what those words meant. But I thought, you know what? We should share that. So I went to the third member of our podcast, which is ChatGPT, and I said, name the different areas or parts of a church. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, let me just show you all the stuff that it gave me inside,
Wow.
outside, all around. I know I was way more than I was expecting. And also on YouTube, you can see some photos of the inside of churches or places of worship. On the audio side, we're going to do our best to describe whatever is going on. Here's the thing. They start with the exterior. I guess a bunch of churches have a steeple. I actually think is really cool when you can look out across the horizon and you can see a steeple and you know that if it has a cross at the top, you know that it's a Christian one. But I've seen other, like a mosque. There was one called the Self-Realization Fellowship, and those buildings were very unique. There was the only time I ever saw buildings like that was at the Self-Realization Fellowship. That's kind of what I'm talking about, where it's almost like branding for a place of worship. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
I realized that I subconsciously know all of the colors of every fast food restaurant. Like I don't even have to see the sign. If I see the outside of the building, I say, "Oh, that's a Jack in the Box." Oh, look, there's a Burger King. That kind of thing. And so
Hmm.
I'm thinking that with places of worship, it's almost similar, kind of, sort of. This is a church. If you follow a different religion or theology, bear with us here because you get the idea. So the exterior, there's a steeple or a bell tower, which I think is awesome. The spire, these are all kind of basically the same thing. The facade is the front exterior of the church. The portico. Now, the only other person that I've ever heard use the word portico is my co-host for the wedding ceremony podcast, JP Reynolds. That area where you drive up to a hotel or a resort and it's a covered area where the valet takes your car. That's called a portico. And I guess maybe that originated from a church because it's a covered entrance, I guess because of the rain or something like that. Then the entrance area. Now, this is where it gets really fun. The Narthex, Narthex, that's the entrance lobby or the vestibule. And I can picture clearly my church. You walk through the front, it wasn't a big church. You walk through the front doors, and there's this area. And sometimes they'll have books or pamphlets and also there's a door to the office where the pastor had his desk and where my mom had her desk. But that was the narthex. When you go to a hotel, that front area is called the foyer or foyer. Do you pronounce it foyer or foyer?
I say foyer.
Yeah, I pronounce it like that because it seems like it's French to me,
Mhm.
but I don't know because I've heard a bunch of people just say foyer. The entrance area is also called the vestibule, 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 which is another end. But I grew up with narthex. Just the fact that I know that word makes me feel important. The actual worship space. The nave, NAV, the main seating area where the congregation gathers. I didn't know that. Pews, just the fact that you know the word pew means that you've been in a church that had a wooden bench, because that's what they call those. Some places have chairs, no big deal. So the front of the church, this is where you direct your attention during worship services. The sanctuary is the sacred area at the front where the worship is led. In some traditions, the entire worship room is called the sanctuary. That makes sense. You know what's interesting? In the Hunchback of Notre Dame, the word sanctuary is used a lot because I guess there are people that are being pursued by the police of Paris. And if they run into the church, they have sanctuary. I don't really know exactly how that works. I'm not sure that that would hold true for Los Angeles, where if somebody ran into a place of worship, then they couldn't be arrested. I don't think it works like that. What do you think about that?
Well, not anymore. Back in the day, I feel like church had a very different role in people's lives where it was a protector and it gave guidance and it took care of the poor and the sick and the needy.
There are still places of worship that take that role on in terms of doing community outreach and food drives and stuff like that, which is pretty cool. I guess it's just part of the directive. Like if you follow Jesus in the Gospels, and he very much is taking care of the poor and
Right.
those less fortunate and
Yeah.
that sort of thing. So I can understand where a person who create an organization would consider that part of the ministry. What's that old saying? The way to a man's heart is through his stomach. You ever heard
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. True. At
I
least in my
can't
experience.
I can't dispute that. I just
Yep.
yeah. Well, I guess maybe that's another way for if you wanted to get more conversions into your philosophy or theology is to take care of them. Show them kindness and charity and generosity. It can serve both purposes where you have a specific goal that you want to achieve, but also, you're doing kind things for people, which is part of humanity, I think, in my opinion. So that's a sanctuary. The chancel, CHANCEL, that's the area around the altar reserved for clergy and choir. Oh, I can picture that clear as day. And then the altar, obviously, the communion table. Communion is usually with wine and some sort of a bread cracker substance. And there are some that don't do the wine. We did the wine in our version of Lutheran. It was the Missouri Synod. So we had little cups, use actual wine, communion wine, which was really fun for me as a kid. I got to start taking communion when I was in eighth grade after I got confirmed. But I've heard that in the Catholic Church, they don't do wine, that the priest drinks the wine and then distributes the Eucharist, which is the crackers or the whatever you call it. What do you call those?
I've only seen it happen during like what they call the nuptial mass, where it's like a
Oh,
ceremony that's an actual mass, and I see the communion happening, but I'm not privy to what they
well,
do or
the
what it's made of.
communion is also called the sacrament, and you guys have that, right?
We do, and it's just bread and water. So
Oh,
it's very
water.
water. I would imagine at some point it might have been wine, but it's water now.
Yeah, it was drawn from the Last Supper on Maundy,
Hmm.
Thursday, where take, drink, this is my, anyway. So we do that communion thingy. The pastor had a special tray that was specifically holding those little glasses that I thought was pretty cool. The apse, APSE. I've never heard of this. Have you ever heard of this?
No?
The rounded or semicircular recess behind the altar. The reason I haven't heard of it is because our altar was like a big table against the back wall, and above that was the cross. You know what I heard? The difference between the crucifix and the cross. The crucifix in a Catholic church has Jesus on the crucifix, and in the Protestants, I think most of them, Lutheran especially, because that was my experience, there's only the cross. Jesus is not up there. When I asked somebody what's the deal, the explanation was because we believe that Jesus came down from the cross. He's not there anymore. Uh,
Interesting.
yeah, I'll go with that. That's fine with me. I'm sure that the Catholics have a different, explanation of why Jesus is still on the cross. Maybe because of the sacrifice that he made and they never want to forget it. The reredos, Reredos, the decorative screen or wall behind the altar. We had something like that for sure, but I didn't know that was. Did you ever heard that word before?
No, I haven't, but I've seen what it's describing.
Yeah, exactly. The retable, the artwork or structure placed behind the altar, we had a bunch of those, and they were kind of seasonal. They would have like these banners or something that would, depending upon what was going on, and the altar rail, the communion rail. We had that, and it was so it was a railing in the front of the altar space, and there was a gap in the middle, obviously, so that people can come up and down. But when it was time for communion, they had a piece of the railing that they would come and put in place. I think the other side of the railing had like a rack of little holes where once you drank your communion wine, you'd be able to put that in the railing. You didn't have to put it back in the thing. I could be wrong. The speaking or music areas, the pulpit, everybody can identify a pulpit. You've seen a pulpit. It's like a shell kind of where the clergy stands up into this little, for us, it was wood. Do you have something like that?
Yeah.
But that's the pulpit. We also had another place off to the side that was more of a lectern type of a deal. We'll get to that in a second. There's the pulpit. There's, oh, there it is, the lectern. That's the stand used for scripture readings. The pastor would get up into the pulpit and do his sermon, but anybody else that came up to do scripture readings would go to the lectern, which was, I guess, the minor leagues. You've done that. You've spoken during a Mormon service. Did they have
Mhm.
a difference? Did you go to a different thing besides the pulpit?
No, I was at the pulpit. I
Uh,
had no idea it came with it had to be a preacher. But what's different in the Mormon church is that there isn't like a pastor that preaches a sermon every Sunday. It rotates through the congregation. So there's a topic that's assigned, and then the person that's speaking that day would research the topic and speak on it. So it's very different than a normal church where you hear a sermon from the same person every week.
Boy, I bet that's changed with AI. Someone can be given a topic and then they let AI do all the research
Oh,
for
I'm
them.
not gonna lie. The last time I spoke, I put what I was talking about. I said, "Here, AI, can I make it any clearer in any places? Is there anything I missed, or is there a juicy tidbit that, historically is in the Bible that I should be quoting?" It improved it.
That's the thing about AI. I understand now there's a big backlash. We talked about this a few episodes ago about how
Yeah.
you spoke to a young woman and your daughter said,
Oh, yeah.
"Don't bring up AI."
Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast with two guys that are really involved in business, and one guy said the new currency is going to be truth because AI is, ubiquitous. Google is starting to identify. I sat through an SEO seminar a couple of days ago, and apparently Google is now really sensitive to AI generated text and certain phrases and that sort of thing, which is why some people are now using prompts that say, don't use this phrase or that phrase or whatever, because it can be tagged as being AI generated. Every time I've used AI to research something, it always tells me something that I didn't know, which I think is brilliant. If I would have had to speak on something in front of a congregation, I would definitely use AI to make sure that all my bases were covered. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. That's
There
what
you
I
go.
did.
There you
Yeah.
go. The choir loft, which is the area for the choir, self-explanatory. Choir stalls is where they sit. The organ loft, yes, indeed. Ours, we didn't have a loft. I understand that some places will have like big pipes in the back, or the organist is sitting up in the back, or whatever. But our organist was right off to the side, right next to the altar. I don't know. I kind of like that. I like watching him do his thing because a church organ has a couple of different sets of keys, different levels, which you've seen in other places. But on the floor, there's also pedals that are the scale of music. So there's black pedals and there's regular pedals. And while this guy was playing the music with his hands, his feet were doing the bass line. It
Yep.
was amazing. I worked at a nightclub that was a rock and roll nightclub, and I was a DJ. So they had a live rock and roll band for about 40 minutes out of the hour. Then I would play 20 minutes. And one time a trio came in, just three people, the drummer, the guitar player, and a guy at an organ. And he did the bass line with his feet. They talk about how some of the great R&B singers came right out of church, that they were gospel singers. And I thought this guy learned his craft playing church music because of what he was able to do and create all this music from this one box. That was cool. Some churches have a band, so they have a band platform. Now, I didn't know this. Apparently, there are some churches that are constructed like a cross, where they have a long hallway, which I guess would be the main worship area. Then they have a cross section. It's literally two rectangles on top of each other perpendicular. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I haven't been into a lot of Catholic churches or cathedrals, but I know they have side areas for like baptism and the Holy Mary and that sort of thing. And so I'm wondering now if those buildings are also in the shape of a cross. But the whole idea is that the cross section is called the transept. The actual cube where the two rectangles intersect is called the crossing. Then there are side rooms. Now, this is another thing where I thought I was really in the know because I was an acolyte. For those of you who are unfamiliar, an acolyte are the young boys, kids that wear white robes, and our job was to light the candles at the beginning of the service. Then they had a little bench that we sat over there, and then if there was communion, then maybe we would bring something to the pastor. But basically, our job was candle. We had to do candles. We had to light them, and then we had to extinguish them at the end of the ceremony. Where we got dressed was called the sacristy. There was a door at the side of the altar, and there was a room, clergy robes and all that kind of stuff. And that's where we would get dressed. And that was called the sacristy, Sacristy. The vestry is where we hung the clothes, the vestments, and those are kind of like the robes and all the things that clergy will wear, kind of layer by layer by layer. Then there's the robing room, the bride's room. We had a school attached to our church, and so the bridal suite was probably one of those classrooms or something like that. Okay, special areas. The baptistry. I had a niece who had kids, and they got baptized at a Catholic cathedral, and they had this whole separate room with the baptismal font, and it was awesome. Lots of stained glass and that kind of thing. And I thought that was really cool. Then the baptismal font is where they put the water. It's a big bowl, and usually it's on some kind of ornate stand. The baptismal pool. Oh, I dated a girl who was from West Texas, and everybody's Baptist there. And on an off day, we went into the church that she grew up in. It was open because she grew up in farmland. They had the actual pool, dunking tank. Wait, do Mormons have a dunking tank?
Yeah, we call it the font though, but it's actually beneath ground. It's not quite the size of a pool. It's kind of like a jacuzzi that's maybe four jacuzzis big.
Oh, that's big, big.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one was like a size of a jacuzzi, maybe
Oh,
even
yeah.
even smaller, just enough for two
Yeah.
people to get in. The person who's doing the baptizing and the person who's being baptized. It was that kind of a deal. But the whole thing is it's complete immersion. You dunk them.
Right.
If your baptismal or your tank is big, does that mean a bunch of people happen all at the same time?
No, it's usually just the maybe I'm it's funny, maybe I'm remembering it wrong because it does only fit like the person who's getting baptized and the person baptizing them.
Oh, there you go.
But you
Yeah.
know what? There's a mirror there, and I think that's so they put a mirror behind it so everybody in the back can see what's going on because I mean it's down in the ground. So
Well,
maybe
that's
that's why
interesting. Is it supposed to be down in the ground? Is that part of the instructions that you got to build it down into the ground?
I wouldn't know that. I just know that it's down.
Or is it just practical because you can cover it and now it's just part of the floor?
I don't know. I mean, they fill it for, they don't leave the water in it. They fill it when there's a baptism and then
Yeah.
drain it.
Yeah,
So
that makes sense.
there's got to be a reason why it is the way it is.
I bet it's practical.
Very, yeah, very
Yeah.
symbolic. I don't know. I kind of feel like there might be some symbolism there that I just don't remember.
Huh. Okay. Here's something that I've never heard before: the Lady Chapel, the small chapel dedicated to Mary in Catholic churches. I've never heard of the Lady Chapel. Have you?
No, and it's so cute.
It is
But I
really
have
cute.
seen, when there's a Catholic church not far from here that I've done several ceremonies at that has like I call it the sanctuary. Like it encompasses everything in the room that you're in for a service. And so over to one side, there's no chairs facing it, but there's like a whole part of the wall that's all about Mary. And people go over there and, during the ceremony service, they give her a flower. They present flowers to Mary. But then there's also, and sometimes there's like candles and other things around it. But yeah, Mary is very, and in other churches where it's like you have the sanctuary, like the actual sanctuary, where the middle, where, the service is taking place. But then on the one side is the thing about Mary, and on the other side is the thing about Jesus.
Right.
Yeah, it's so fun for me to go to other churches. I love
Oh
it.
my gosh, it is so cool. Oh, by the way, storage and service areas includes a kitchen. We had a kitchen at the Lutheran church. It was awesome. And it was very common to have events there. And there was a room that was right next to the kitchen, the multi-purpose room. And that's where they would set up tables. And like there were some services where after the service, they'd do donuts, but
Yeah.
complete meals. I mean, like banquets and that kind of stuff were. Do you have that too? You have kitchens at the Mormon churches?
Yes, we do. And it's like an overflow to the chapel that is a gymnasium. So it's like if you open up one wall, it's like an overflow. So it extends the chapel, but then you can close the wall and it's like a multi-purpose room. So most commonly used for
Oh,
basketball, but there's full reception, like wedding receptions happen inside of this room. And we call them linger longers, where it's after church, you stay and you linger longer and you have a meal with, yeah. So we definitely use it for things like that too.
but
So,
it's big enough for a basketball court.
oh yeah.
Wow. The room that I'm talking about, because our church was small, was, I don't know, I'm going to just guess maybe 30 by 40, something like that.
Yeah.
Big
There's
enough
even
to
a
put,
stage at ours
oh,
where it's like
yeah, I've seen
opposite.
that.
So back in the day when I was a kid, we used to have like performances there.
Would
And
that
they
be
don't
like
even
where
use
the
the stage
Christmas
anymore.
pageants would be? That kind of stuff would be on the stage? or inside the church?
No, we would do that in the chapel. It would be
Yeah.
more for like we called them ward activities. And I remember there was one time where it was like a talent show and we would watch, everyone doing their little talents up on the stage. But I remember being a kid and pretending like I was, a performer and I would go in there, the curtains are drawn and I'm doing my little performance all by myself, nobody was around. And it's funny because the other day we had a linger longer and there were little kids doing the same thing I did. And I was like,
There you
good
go.
to know.
Yeah.
Imagination's still alive.
I've been thinking about that a lot lately, how humanity doesn't really change over the as long as we've been on the face of the earth.
Yeah,
There's a lot of things that just don't change. That's
yeah,
why scriptures that are thousands of years old are still revered and attended to. And also books that were written centuries ago still have the same kind of tug on us emotionally. Yeah, humans are just humans. And so little kids are going to want to play with the curtain. And that's just the way it works.
yep.
All right, Wendy, tell everybody how they get in touch with us.
You can find us at spiritualcake.com where you could go back and listen to or read any of our previous episodes. You can click one of the social media icons and join us on YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram, or you can send us a message requesting a topic or even to join the conversation.
Absolutely. And when you do join the conversation, please know we welcome you with open arms. That's it for this episode of the Spiritual Cake Podcast. This is Clint, and on behalf of Wendy, we will see you next time.